discussion, that would be helpful. But I leave it to you.
So for me, I could be on the record. I'm well practiced at this point.
I could definitely be on the record.
I think it's preferable to be on the record because this is important enough for others.
Whether you like it or not, it's on the record.
So I think we've had years of off the record with the UAE, and now it's time to be on the record.
Beautiful, beautiful. I love it. Jason, why don't you lead in?
Continued progress. So let me start with John. John's a good friend, does great work over at Our Crowd. John, let me ask, did the Abraham Accords open a brand new door for you, or were there ongoing discussions and relationships that perhaps you now see in a different light?
Well, I think many of the people on the panel, as well as in the community, were active in discussions before. I was in Abu Dhabi last December, spoke openly as an Israeli venture capitalist. People once described the UAE-Israel relationship before the normalization as the worst kept secret in the Middle East. And that was happening, but this changes everything. And what fundamentally has changed is this notion that you are literally living in a historic moment where the people of both countries are so enthusiastic. I just saw some polling data that showed 90% of the Emiratis like the deal, okay? And it actually goes up as the age of the respondents goes down. I'm here in Dubai now, I'm flying out home tonight to Israel, but I had the most magical meetings where it just felt like family, like we're going to do great things. And if you look at the map and you realize the coming together of what I would call Silicon Beach, you know, with its two wings over in the Dubai beach all the way to the Israeli beaches. The fact that we will take our rightful place as the center of the world together, where this land bridge will become a bridge between Europe and Africa, Asia and the West. I think it's really important for us to understand the responsibility we have in these early days to be conscious and to focus on the fact that what we're building here are foundations for generations. That it's not just we're going to be the ones blessed to work with this generation of Emiratis, but Imirza Hashem, inshallah, it will be our children and our children's children all the way through. And this is going to be transformative. I'll tell you, you know, getting a chance to work with people like yourself, Jason, and with Sabah and so many of our new friends and even some old friends in the Emirates has just been remarkable.
Expression, you used it, I think Rabbi Berman did, and perhaps some others. One of my favorite expressions during the time that I was there, from the leadership to every ordinary person that I met, was, it's time to bring the family back together again. I think that's what we're seeing. I think that's what we're feeling. I felt it dramatically since the announcement of the Abraham Accords. And just, you mentioned the beaches. Back in January, I was with my family in Israel on vacation. We went to Dubai because I wanted my family to understand my life as a diplomat for all those years. And it took nearly a full day to get there. We had to travel through Jordan, the flight schedules, this and that. And now direct flights, Emirates, Etihad, it's quite remarkable.
28 flights a week scheduled at the moment.
Amazing. So let's rewind the clock a little bit. I want to jump over to Phil, an old friend of mine. Phil, I think you were a man before your time, and you might have taken a trip to the Emirates as early as 1993, if I'm not mistaken. Can you share some of the thoughts that you had then and an observation about, did you ever see this coming?
Thank you, Jason. Thank you. And thank you for all that you do. It's really an honor to be on this panel with people like John and Sabah. It's so 1993, it's October of 93. And remember the Oslo, the peace accords were signed in September. I get a phone call in my office from person says that he works for the foreign minister of Israel, Mr. Shimon Peres, and Mr. Peres would like to talk to me. Now, I thought it was some kind of practical joke. I hung up and called back again and said, Mr. Peres would like to talk to you, Mr. Rosen. So I get on the phone, and it was Shimon Peres asking me if I would go with a couple of colleagues to the Arab countries, Saudi Arabia, Abu Dhabi, Dubai, Bahrain, Kuwait, and others, and talk to the business community about whether they'd be ready to do business with Israel. The strong feeling was that that they would immediately jump on the Oslo Peace Accords and be ready to do business with Israel on a full scale. So we did it. We had 49 meetings in 6 days. It was exhausting. The meetings were not what I expected. They were not what you would have today. It was, I guess, how many years before its time? And I was a little depressed at that point in terms of what action was going to take place. The fascinating thing, and I'll end with this, is I flew on a plane from Bahrain to Jordan, because in order to get into Israel at that point in time, you had to go to Jordan, and then from Jordan take a taxi across two taxis across the Allenby Bridge. On that plane, I'm sitting next to a young man in t-shirt and jeans and a baseball cap and a leather jacket. And he says to me, "What's a Jewish kid doing going from Bahrain to Jordan?" I said, "First of all, how do you know I'm a Jewish kid?" He said, "The baseball cap." He said, "Whenever I see a baseball cap, I think it's somebody hiding a yarmulke underneath." He said, "I'm the only one who wears a baseball cap without the yarmulke underneath." So I said, "All right." And I told him the story. And he said, "What's your conclusion?" I said, "Well, it wasn't great." I said, "They all said it would be a long time before the business community starts doing business in Israel." He said to me, "Well, let me show you something." He pulls down a gym bag, which is above our heads, and it's a heavy, heavy gym bag. And inside are cans of soup. And he opens it up, and it's soup with Arab writing on it. And he pulls it out, takes a knife out of his pocket because, we're pre 9/11, opens up the can, actually opens the label, and underneath there's another label, and it's an Israeli soup company. He said, "I am the largest distributor of this soup around the world." He said, "Mostly I sell in the Arab world." He said, "So there is business being done." And he said, "It's being done quietly now." But he said, and I mark his words, he said, "I promise you, within 25, 30, whatever number of years it is, this is going to be an active partnership between Israel and the Arab countries, particularly Abu Dhabi, Dubai, and Bahrain." He also labeled a couple of others, but hopefully they'll hit the stage pretty soon. Jason, you probably know better than I do, but please God, that should happen. So I think that people have been waiting for this for a long time, and this is, as we say, Baruch Hashem, Inshallah. So I hope it continues to expand, and the work that you put into process, I hope it continues to grow and be a Kiddush Hashem for all of us.
Thank you, Phil. And before Gilad, I just want to address one point that Phil made. We should give, of course, credit to the Kingdom of Bahrain for joining in the Abraham Accords. But we also should give credit to other countries, Saudi Arabia in particular, although we are not yet there, and God willing, it will come. Saudi Arabia opened their airspace for flights from Israel to fly over Saudi Arabia airspace. That is huge, and that also helps this partnership between Israel and its Arab neighbors. So a big shout out to them as well. Gilad, let me ask you, a big deal guy. What do you think, what sectors, what industries do you think are the most interesting today Israel and the United Arab Emirates can focus on.
So thank you, Jason, and it's great to be here. And thank you for all you do, Jason, and for the great panel. And before I jump into the industries, I'd like to say that we're all looking forward to the Saudi Arabia deal. Jason, hopefully you probably know better than us when that will happen, but we're really, really waiting for the Saudi Arabia to join in. And you know, you come from politics, and most of the panel here come from the business side, and politics tend to interest politicians. It is often said that peace interests the people. A byproduct of the sustainable peace is an active business relationship between the countries. And the notion of or lagoim, being the light into other nations, of our closest neighbors of this region, is the epitome of that time. So I'm very, very happy to be a very, very small part of making history and being Or Lagoim. And regarding the different sectors and industries that I am seeing, when I founded the United Arab Emirates Israel Innovation Office, I started receiving tens and dozens of friend requests on LinkedIn from friends in the United Arab Emirates, and of course from Israelis. And everybody was starting to talk business. And there's a few sectors that kind of right away hit, and I think everybody's talking about, whether it be food tech, food security. As you guys probably heard, 90% of the food in the United Arab Emirates is being imported today. Fintech, agri-tech, smart cities, healthcare, logistics, aviation, transportation, of course, cybersecurity. But we have to remember how close physically Israel and the United Arab Emirates is, and where we are strategically. So logistics and transportation, something that Israel is not known for, can be a huge part of the deal here. And containers, the ports. But I do want to touch upon 5 different sectors that I think are going to be the ones that are going to have the most impact between the relationship between Israel and the United Arab Emirates, and I'll be happy to say why. So the first industry that I'm gambling on would be clean tech and renewable energy. There's a national objective to increase the contribution of clean energy in the United Arab Emirates from 25% today to 50% by 2050, and reduce the footprint in 70%. So you can imagine how many opportunities, what opportunities there are for Israeli companies. And second industry is telecommunications. And one must understand that the UAE, they have deep expertise in many fields. Telecommunications is one of them. And the UAE operators show superior shareholder returns throughout the years. And UAE is at the forefront of the telecom innovation. And the UAE is the first in the Middle East and fourth globally to employ 5G technology. So I think there's a lot of opportunities for Israeli companies in that field. And 3 other fields that I'd like to touch on is agri-tech, which has become particularly strategic nowadays. It's a strategic priority for the federal government of the UAE in light of the COVID-19 pandemic. It's critical for ensuring the food security of the United Arab Emirates. I can tell you that the first deal that my office closed had to do with an Israeli agro-tech providing sensors, know-how, and R&D to a local company in one of the Emirates in Sharjah. And 2 other industries, and I'll be done by then, is one is government and public sector. So whoever can sell into the government and the public sector in the UAE hits the jackpot. The public sector spending is north of $100 million a year. consists 25% of their GDP, so it's huge. And lastly is fintech. And the Central Bank of the United Arab Emirates is opening a fintech sandbox. Also, one has to know that there's no new banking entrance in the last 10 years in the UAE, but they are very, very interested in technology that is related to fintech. I'll give you a few examples. Payment B2B to C, open API banking platforms, digital KYC, know your customers, banking out of the box, and probably Dubai wants to be cash free. So buy now, pay later banking and credit card banking solutions. So those are the areas that I would bet on.
Thank you, Gilad. John, our crowd has investors investing capital with our crowd from all over the globe. You also have several hundred portfolio companies. I think the viewers here would really benefit from hearing your views on what you think, which sectors or industry you think represent the most immediate opportunities to leverage this new and hopefully growing and deep relationship between the two countries.
You know, Jason, first of all, this is just such a special event, and having you host this couldn't be better. And, you know, I think, again, I wanted just to echo what Phil and others have said, you know, about your prophetic work, okay, in seeing this and it coming to fruition. But I want to pass the question, if I can, to my colleague, Sabah, who I think can speak better even than I can regarding the interest, you know, in the UAE. We basically, I don't know if people know, but I think are the first Israeli company to have hired a senior Emirati as a partner to build out a significant presence there. Turns out that we were introduced by a very, very, I don't know, I don't think he's a YU alum, but a mutual friend of ours in New York. And we met on Zoom about 6 weeks ago. About 3 weeks ago, we brought Sabah on and announced it. And literally, I just spent the last 3 days with Sabah in Dubai. It seems like we've known each other for months. Okay, we now, you know, are 3 days into our face-to-face relationship, back on Zoom again, unfortunately. But I really think that that would be, you know, best answered by him in terms of, you know, where you think, Sabah, based on, you know, what you've been learning about our crowd and our portfolio, the near-term, you know, opportunities lie.
Thanks, John. It's an honor to be here. Before I answer the specifics of sector, I think it's important to relate to the rest of the panel and the audience, the slightly different way of thinking, the viewpoint that we have here in the Emirates, because I think it's important to start from that context, and then we can go down. So a couple of points. One is that in the Emirates, we don't see this as a peace deal because we were never at war. There was never any animosity. This is a normalization deal based on an initial diplomatic position of the leadership. So we see a lot of Israelis come and say, oh, you know, is this going to move forward, or is this going to be a cold peace? This isn't a peace. It's just normalization. No one had any animosity. And I think this is an important point. Going to Saudi, which is a big question, Saudi has made the decision. This is the way the Gulf works. You know, the UAE makes decisions in consultation with its important partners, and Saudi is one of those partners. So to me, it's not so much if, but when. And I don't want to get into the political context, but it's important to understand that the UAE wouldn't move without consultation with others. So now to go to sectors, I think the way of thinking currently from a lot of the Israeli business community is, where is the consumption in the UAE? And I think Gilad covered that quite well. What I'd like to say is, okay, that's a good first step, but you've got to think big. The UAE is not just coming out of the wilderness and its first market is Israel. The UAE has been doing business around the world since inception. And really, if you want to find the best partners here in the UAE to work with, you don't think just about what is the consumption, because no one in the UAE from an investor level, it's not enough just domestic consumption. We have less than 1 million Emiratis, 900,000 and change, and the total population is 9 million. What you've got to think is like DP World that you saw, is what will excite the Emiratis is when you say, hey, here is a business opportunity that we can work with you and scale globally. You know, maybe Israel has the comparative advantage out into Europe and North Americas, but the Emirates has a comparative advantage when you're talking to Southeast Asia. You know, Malaysia and Indonesia are massive markets, and the UAE does have a comparative advantage. So whereas the sectors that Gilad had, I hope I'm pronouncing your name right, had listed are of great thank you, are of great interest for domestic consumption. Anything that has global demand will rank higher than that in interest for Emirati investors. So why am I saying this? I'm not saying that necessarily one is better than the other. I'm just saying you don't have to focus just on domestic consumption. If there is something that is, you know, like logistics or the ports, DP World, domestic consumption is not enough. I mean, they're one of the largest port operators in the world, and they are the largest foreign processor of the U.S. naval fleet in the world. Most people don't know that. They keep it quiet as well. But so I think probably the greatest ROI is when you have you know, I think the Israeli business community has a clear lead in ability to innovate. But I think that the UAE can bring a lot to the table in terms of scaling globally. I mean, Dubai is a global brand. Just you say Dubai, that's a global brand. And I think that it's important to try to open one's mind to the many possibilities. I think fintech is very important, not because there hasn't been a new license in 10 years, but because we have over 40 banks servicing 8 million people, half of which are blue collar workers. And there's clearly no competition. And so I think what fintech brings is it just leapfrogs the old manual way of doing things. But more importantly for the UAE and a lot of the interest, including from the central bank and the two main centers, Abu Dhabi Global Markets and the IFC, is not just for domestic demand. They want to be a global center, just like they did it with transportation, Emirates and Etihad, just they did with logistics, just how they did it with hospitality. They want to do it in other areas. So they're not just looking to buy tech or transfer tech. They want to find ways to work with each other. And the important thing about Israel is it's close. We have the same weekend, but mostly that the economies are about the same size. When you talk to American companies and say, hey, come innovate here in the UAE, they say you're smaller than Newark, New Jersey. What do I want to do there? Give me some money, I'll open a sales office. But for Israel, opening here it's a material market, and vice versa. DP World is looking to not bring money to Israel. It's looking to bring knowledge and expertise and logistics and work on the ports. And if you think about it, is how these two markets can work together to form a global sort of bridge or sort of takeoff pad. I think that you can really see that things change. And I'll just close with one thing. I'm sorry if I take it too long. I think this is the last step. This is the last link in a network that will rival China's Belt and Road Initiative. China's trying to build a Belt and Road Initiative that is from scratch, whereas between Israel and the UAE, they have everything covered. It's just the last link we have between them. China is doing it for political reasons. Israel and the UAE are commercial. China has global power ambitions. We don't. And we're looking, as sort of transit points to connect the world. So if you think about it in that way, I think that innovation and consumption and bringing it here is an initial step, but I think that you can get bigger. John said on CNBC today, he's using the number 10 billion. I think that's low by at least 1 0. And I think that the way to get there is to think globally. It's not that we've opened markets to each other. We are gates for each other to whole new networks that when you combine, it's just going to be fantastic.
Thank you, Sabah. All really important points. I want to underscore 2 of them. One is people should not lose sight of the critical message Sabah is talking about how a partnership between Israel and the UAE is really a springboard to so many other places. Many people do speak about the UAE alone, and they're losing sight of what Sabah is saying in terms of what can be beyond the UAE, using the UAE connections and experience throughout the world. The second one, and this is more of a friendly warning to everybody. Sabah mentioned a cash, I think he used the phrase cash machine or something like that. And I tell all of my friends, if you are only going to view the UAE as an automatic teller machine, give me money, invest in my company, thank you, you're going to be sorely disappointed. The UAE has tremendous talent. They need to be viewed as equal partners, and everybody is going to benefit. Those people that travel to the UAE and think that they're just going to grab some money and run, not the way to do business. And frankly, you could ruin it for others. So be very mindful of it. With that, I want to turn back to Phil for a minute. Phil, you've had Emirati clients for a long time. Do you see them investing in Israel in the immediate or near future?
So I'll tell you, my Emirati clients are some of the biggest companies in the Emirates, and also some Saudi clients. And they've invested in the United States and Europe for many, many years, and I've represented them in many of their investments. I've never mixed the two, principally because I think that my Israeli clients, my Israeli customers, it just didn't seem viable 10 years ago, 5 years ago, to introduce the Emiratis to the Israelis, although, on occasion I would mention it and they would say that's not our area. Today I got 3 different emails from clients in the Emirates saying to me, are you involved in the action that's taking place between the Emirates and Israel? We'd love to talk to you about it. We'd love to get more involved and love to figure out how we can make it a part of our business. To me, that's a giant, great sign. And don't worry, John, I'm sending all those contacts to you, I promise. So I think that
That saved me an email, Phil. Thank you.
I'm extremely, extremely hopeful that the big clients, and I just want to echo what Sabah said so beautifully. And you repeated, Jason. The Emiratis are really smart. They're really good at what they do. They're very, very focused. And I think that the partnerships here will be much more than just, an ATM machine. This is going to be a partnership in which each side contributes knowledge, contributes experience, opportunity. At the signing of the normalization accords a few weeks ago, just by chance, I was interviewed by Bahrain TV. I still haven't seen the interview, but I was interviewed on Bahrain TV, probably because my seat was right next to the cameraman. So he figured he'd not have to walk very far. And, he asked me the questions, which are great questions about, how excited the Israelis are and the American Jewish community and to support the Israelis. How excited are you about this? And after going through that, I turned to him and I said, how about the man in the street in Bahrain? He said, the man in the street in Bahrain is head over heels excited about this opportunity. And it's an opportunity not just to get in on Israeli technology and Israeli thought process. It's an opportunity to share both ways and an opportunity to find some really amazing partnerships that will go on for generations. And he said, I look forward to my grandkids spending their summers in Israel, to having partnerships all across the board. I said, don't wait for your grandkids. He said, don't worry. He said, my children are already on top of it. So I think this is exciting on all levels. And I think you're 100% right. This is not a one-way street. This is a two-way street. And the big companies in Israel and in the United Arab Emirates will be making moves very quickly.
Yep, thank you, Phil. Let me address cultural issues for a moment. In many ways, our cultures are very, very similar. They're founded on shared values, family, religious needs, dietary and prayer restrictions, and things like that. But when it comes to the business world, cultural issues also play a role. Gilad, we have only about 10 minutes left, and I'd like actually you and our crowd to address this point as well. So can you spend maybe 2 minutes or so talking about your experiences and how you see the cultural differences coming into play?
Sure, absolutely. So first of all, Sabah, I apologize if I didn't mention it again, but Israelis see United Arab Emirates as a hub to the Arab world, and I think this is a huge advantage. Now, regarding our cultural differences, I think we're cousins. We're very similar into many aspects, but the Israelis have to understand that the Emiratis come from a culture that's full of respect for tradition, hospitality, warm welcome, building relationships, and going out for the marathon and not the sprint. And when I talk to Israeli companies who want to do business in the United Arab Emirates, and I get those requests on a daily basis, and I explain to them that we're not just going to knock on their door, fly there, and get a business deal. We have to build a relationship for a few years, and the Emiratis are looking for long-term partnerships. They're looking for joint ventures, and they're not looking for what we call in Israel, tachlis. Let's go, close the deal, and go. And you got to be respectful of their time. Sometimes with my experience, things can go either very, very fast or very slow. You can talk to everybody, to someone, and think you're going to close a deal, and then they disappear for a month, and then you'll get a phone call from someone saying, hey, let's go back and do this. So it's just a different way of doing business. But I do think we're very like-minded individuals. And I'll just close by saying it's all about your network and the connections you've built throughout the years. I've been bringing delegations to Israel from other countries, and I've had relationships with Emiratis for many, many years. And also my brother, Yaron, who owns Maverick Israel VC, has had some connections there for years. So once you build those connections throughout the years, you're able to actually do business and not on a one-time street.
Thank you. Thank you. John, I don't know if you or Sabah want to address the point of, what do you think, either both cultural differences or perhaps some misunderstandings about the region, in particular the Emirates, that can help people conduct business the proper way there?
Look, I'm going to let Sabah sort of give his reflections on what it's like working with a bunch of unruly Israelis, albeit a lot of us are immigrants at our crowd. But this last trip was particularly striking for me for a bunch of reasons. One is that I got a chance to use a bracha which I never thought I would get a chance to use, Natan le basar mikvodo, which is the blessing you're supposed to say in the presence of royalty. And it was moving. Okay, and the fact is that I think that there is a certain role that observant Jews can play in this process, because my sense about the Emirati culture is it is, while very innovative and exciting and truly entrepreneurial, right? One of the I think the big issues that we face is that people aren't studying and learning the history and understanding how far they've come, what remarkable strides this country has made. And again, we're talking about the Emirates, but it really is the whole region there. And that's the first sign of respect, is to begin to understand this stuff. But on the other hand, they're very deeply traditional, and what's amazing is how dress is really important. And we learn from the Torah about what kept us alive in Mitzrayim, and the fact that this nation really focuses on maintaining. I've been learning all about the different kind of kandura and what it represents, and how do you identify these people. But on the other hand, you sit down at a dinner with a quite prominent person, and I was talking to him about one of our newest investments, an American company actually called Ripple, which is in the plant-based milk replacement area. And he looks at me and goes, "Oh, you mean like the Dead?" And I said, "What?" He goes, "The Dead song, Ripple." And it was all of a sudden apparent to me, and I went to Berkeley. Okay, I was sort of an almost honorary Deadhead, and here's this Emirati senior guy making a reference to the Dead, and I wasn't even picking up on it because I was too focused on, well, they're Emiratis. And there is just so much in common with us on many levels that it's just going to be wonderful fun. I also want to really second what you said, Jason, about the two-way street. And what we're very proud of is that literally on this last 3 days, we've shaken hands on our first investment in an Emirati company. And so that we're going to hopefully, this has not yet been publicly announced, we're not naming the name of it, but among friends I can mention it, that we're not just creating joint ventures and sourcing investment and opening up offices, but we're going to invest in Emirati entrepreneurs, and that I think is going to lead hopefully to many other Israelis as well as Jewish groups in America really putting their weight behind this, and it's just great. Sabah, please.
I think that if you want to understand connection and how timely this is, we should let Phil tell you what he just found out.
So Sabah and I actually met a decade ago in Saudi Arabia, and he was with his, was it your uncle or your?
My uncle, yeah. My mother's brother.
Right, he was with his uncle, and we met and we talked about a bunch of different things. And he, thank you for remembering, thank you for recognizing. As soon as you said it, I said, of course I remember. And I have to tell you that these are the seeds that are planted, and years later they come to fruition. So I look forward to doing a lot of things together with you and John and everybody else in Gilad. And the one thing I want to mention is that what's brought us all here together, and this is not a conclusory remark, but I just want to say that I thank Yeshiva University and Rabbi Ari Berman for making all of this available to us, and Lawrence Askowitz and everybody else involved for creating this opportunity to bring all of us together. This is, as I said to my kids this morning, this is like a who's who in my mind. And I'm excited to be part of this, you know, who's who, to be with Jason and Gilad and John and Sabah. This is just great. So thank you, Yeshiva University. And as a board member of Yeshiva University, I'm enormously proud of all that you do. John, one of the funny things that, just to bring this a little bit together, is that when I was at your conference last year, as I was walking out to head to a meeting and then come back a few hours later, as I was walking out, I saw a large group of Yeshiva University students walking into the conference with their professor. And I was so proud that they're making this effort to get involved in the Israeli technology scene, but particularly in some great technology that you bring to the surface. So
By
thank
the way,
you all.
Phil, I think that professor's online. I think it's Michael Strauss. That might have been, but
Yeah. That's great. Thank you.
Funny you say that, because John, if you remember, when I went to your great conference back in 2019, where of course we never would have envisioned COVID or this deal. I joked about holding the conference in Dubai, and now it could happen.
yes, you did, and inshallah that will be happening soon, God willing.
Yeah, actually,
Probably sooner than in Jerusalem, given the openness. I mean, Dubai is open. I mean, the restaurants are full, the hotels are operating, and I even got, before my flight tonight, a COVID test where I got the results in negative, thank God, in 6 hours. So they're a little bit ahead of us in that department.
yeah,
Amazing.
sometimes I think they're ahead of us in a lot of departments. So thank you, everybody. I think it was extremely informative, extremely enjoyable. I appreciate the three of you sharing your wisdom, the four of you, and I look forward to seeing some fruits of this across all sectors. Thank you so much. Thank you, YU. Thank you, Lawrence, for putting this together.
Thank you. What a great panel. If maybe we'll unmute for 1 second so everyone can hear the applause. It was really lived up to all expectations. Was really wonderful. Thank you for giving your time. I'm going to give a little bit of a closing note. I noticed, because I pay careful attention to people's words, Jason early in the administration, and Nikki Haley and a lot of people you were working with used a term that was new, at least new to my ears, which was enduring peace. It was a phrase that I hadn't heard really from past administrations. There's always a peace now, and peace now is wonderful, but the concept of an enduring peace, something that will really last, I think really goes to the nature of what Sabah was saying about collaboration and working together. Not just on the political level, on the senior level, but on the networking, on all the people that are on the call right now, and making that happen. And what I hope happens is that this really becomes a beginning, that we can all together help mobilize a real enduring, perhaps it's normalization, but a real business community that will really have, no one even thinks about going to Dubai or Bahrain or to Israel, that the flow is perfectly normal. And that really happens on the individual basis. The YU professional networks are now probably up to around 3,000 people. I've been running these for about 13 years now, the different events. We're a phenomenal network, and there's a broad community of network over here. I've been getting a whole bunch of questions last second over here, so apologize for the short time frame. What we'd like to do in that effort is to perhaps, and Eliza and Jake and the team at YU are going to send out a notice to people to perhaps think about some breakout sessions to follow up on this. There's a lot of interesting food for thought over here, not just the food tech and ag tech that we were talking about, but a lot of interesting points over here that we're going to send around a note to perhaps create smaller breakout sessions for people to talk about some of the things that have gone on over here and maybe really enabled some good follow-up. So I really want to thank Sabah. Thank you so much, John, and also from the whole team at Our Crowd who helped pull this together. Phil Rosen, how always amazing, a second time this year. Gilad, thank you also for, it was good to meet you as part of this process, and it was really wonderful. And a dear friend, Jason, for everything that you have done over the last several years. An unsung hero, I think, in terms of laying a lot of the foundation for what's happened here. I know it's been going on, it's Sabah said, for many years in the background, but somebody has needed to go ahead and elevate it to really get to this normalization. And you've done a tremendous amount. And whether it's in the history books or in our hearts, we all thank you dearly for everything you've done. And I call to action to everybody that's on this call, that we can be the next accelerant to make this happen. And I hope that everyone will continue to participate in our follow-up sessions. Gilad talked about 5G being an important part. Next week event is on 5G with an important team from Ericsson and others. So continue to stay in touch and in tune. And again, thank you so much, everyone, for being here.
Thank you. Thank you, Lawrence. Thank you, everyone. Really amazing. Have a great day.
Have a great day, everyone. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you. Thanks, Lawrence. Thanks, Jason. See you soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Shalom. Thank you.
Shalom all. Bye-bye.